Good afternoon and welcome to the Global Design Forum 2021. I'm Margaret Cubbage, curator of this year's forum, a hybrid programme of lively talks and debates taking place throughout London Design Festival. The forum facilitates conversations and presentations to demonstrate and acknowledge the value and role of design in a world that is rapidly changing, both socially and environmentally. Today, it is a real pleasure to welcome and introduce to you Usha Raghavachari, an inspirational woman who started her career in the Ford Motor Company 22 years ago, joining as a graduate and working her way through the company to head up and lead the new startup innovation lab, DFord, which established itself in 2019. The remit of DFord includes projects that cover a vast range of operations, from innovations in product and industrial design to branding and new business ventures. Raghavachari leads a team of multidisciplinary designers, bringing human-centered design into the heart of what Ford does. Passionate about developing deep human insights to advance the creative process, whether that's in design or communications, her work looks to drive human progress through empathy, creativity, and design. Today, Usha is going to share with us why this approach is so essential, not only for the future of the automotive industry, but also with the other issues we are currently facing. I'm going to now hand over to Usha, who will present to you today, and at the end of the session we will take some questions, so please do use the Q&A box, and we look forward to hearing today's session.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and hello everyone. Hopefully everyone can see me and hear me okay, and the technology is our friend. Lovely to be with you all today. And I am just okie dokie. So as Margaret said, I'm Usha Raghavachari. I'm the lab director of DFord in London, Melbourne and Sao Paulo. And I'm really excited to be with you all here today to talk about DFord and our approach to human-centered design inside Ford. So what is DFord and why do we exist? I get asked that question a lot. We're a relatively new organization. I was living and working in Shanghai just 2 years ago when I got the call to see if I would be interested in returning home to London to set up a new innovation startup inside Ford Motor Company. And what's not to love about that? So I'd love to tell you a little bit about DFord and why we exist. So DFord is Ford's new human-centered design team. We are a global organization. We have innovation labs set up in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, Detroit in Michigan in the US, Shanghai in China, and I have the privilege of leading a wonderful intercontinental gang based in London, Melbourne, and Sao Paulo in Brazil. So the way to think about DFord is not as a function within the company. We like to think about it as a strategic core capability that we're building for us to be successful as a company in the future. So maybe just to reflect a little bit on the beginning of the journey. And in order to do this, I look back and think back to our previous CEO, Jim Hackett. And Jim was the CEO of Steelcase, the furniture brand, when he joined Ford a few years ago. And he came in to run the Smart Mobility organization. And at that time, Ford was split into two huge divisions: an automotive division, and you can probably all guess what that did, and a mobility division. And the mobility team were basically here to imagine and reimagine the future of mobility. So Jim was brought in to lead that group. When he was at Steelcase, he had a bit of an epiphany about human-centered design. He'd worked very closely there with IDEO, the design firm, and worked many years in Steelcase, perfecting the process and the application of human-centered design, amongst other processes. He was very much a professor and very philosophical in his approach. When he came in to lead the mobility team, he'd been there, 30, 60 days, and he was sharing some reflections with the board. And one of the things that he said is, you know, we've got this, and you can see some of their pictures here, some amazingly talented folks inside Ford who are incredibly passionate about their mission and really desiring to affect change inside the company. But his provocation back to the board of directors was he felt we weren't looking far enough into the future, and that in his words, we weren't looking out of the corners of our eyes. Jim could really see a lot of disruption coming into not only the automotive industry, but the mobility industry more broadly, with all the forces of data and digitalization, electrification, connectivity and autonomy all coming to hit the automotive industry. And he felt like this team needed to provide a lot more provocation and look a lot further into the future. And so he set up, which was at this time 4 or 5 years ago now, the very first kernel, the little acorn that then became DFord. It was a first prototype of an innovation lab that we set up in Silicon Valley, and it was called Greenfield Labs. And that's how this journey begins. That was a prototype lab, and so we brought together a multidisciplinary group of designers, engineers, and business folks, alongside a team of idea designers as well, who Jim brought in to help us with the process. And we were off to the races, reimagining the future of mobility in that team. So fast forward a few years from that moment, and Jim moved from being the CEO of the Smart Mobility organization to now leading Ford Motor Company as our global CEO. So having had some success in our first prototype in California, Jim now instigated a number of similar prototypes, this time turning his attention to the automotive division. What Jim did was look across a number of our biggest businesses across the world and created small teams, and we called them beacon teams. So imagine a beacon of light looking into the future. And these beacon teams were again made up of a small number of incredibly passionate Ford employees and some external partners who we brought in again. And these teams were charged with deeply understanding the needs of the customers of these different businesses. So the truck business in the US, the commercial vehicle business here in the UK, the electric vehicle business globally, just to name a few. And they were asked to deeply understand the needs of those customers and then reimagine the future of those businesses to create new products and services and experience ideas to really transform our fortunes for the future. So again, this was the kind of second scale of the experiment. You can see bottom left here, the team here in the UK that was working on the commercial vehicle beacon project. So these projects, these smaller prototypes were running all around the world for about 18 months. Actually, I was in one of the experiments. I was experimented upon in Shanghai. I was in the electric vehicle team, Team Edison, which is our internal electric vehicle startup. And so they were running and they were very successful until early 2019. And Jim and the leadership team were reflecting on the impact that these teams and this new way of working had had on the business. And the first thing that he acknowledged was the business impact that these teams had had. So not only had they deeply understood the needs of these customers, but they'd come up with new ideas. So they were features and products and service ideas and new experiences that were really transforming our view of the future. And it was really exciting. The second thing though, and actually for Jim, this was even more exciting, is that what was happening around these small teams, they were creating a little bit of a ripple effect in the organization. And they were creating this huge kind of culture change and behavior change around them. And as I'm sure you can all imagine, if you're in a 118-year-old global company, affecting culture change and behavior change is no small feat. And so at that moment, and this was early in 2019, we decided to do two things. Firstly, that we would create human-centered design would become a strategic core capability of the business. And what that meant is that every single person inside Ford Motor Company, wherever they were in the world, would be taught to be able to appreciate the process of human-centered design, but also be able to practice it to a certain extent. And then second, that we would set up a dedicated team. Think of us as the super ninjas, if you like, of design thinking. And this dedicated team would be set up to take on the most difficult challenges and problems that the company was facing globally. And that is how DFord was born. So our mission is very closely aligned with the mission of Ford Motor Company to drive human progress through developing a really deep, empathetic understanding of the humans that we're trying to serve, our customers and potential customers all around the world, and employ a huge number of creative tools and processes, and really bring in an incredible array of design and creative talent in order to make that a possibility. So this is a question I get asked a lot as well. What does the D stand for in DFord? So I would love those of you online, if you're able to access the chat, I'd love you to throw in the chat some of what you think springs to mind when you think of a D. What does the D stand for in DFord? So design, development, dream. I love that. Yeah, very good. Different. Yeah, also great. So you guys know this better than me. Actually, the D, it's a bit of a trick question. It stands for a number of different things inside DFord. The first and the most obvious of which is design. So the D in DFord stands for design, but it is design in the broadest sense. And what that means is beyond automotive design. So we're thinking about a holistic view of design. The D also for us stands for daring. So we're here to provide provocation to the company and provide an external perspective to drive change and transformation inside Ford. We also say we move at the speed of digital, and the world is transforming rapidly in this space with data and digital and supercomputing, to name just a few things. But actually, as a company, we need to move a lot faster and be much more agile in our process as we innovate for the future. Another D that's really important for us and close to our heart is diversity. We very passionately believe that we need to bring together a bunch of different design disciplines and engineers and business folks from all sorts of different backgrounds and experiences, from inside the company and outside the company. And together, that mashup of all these incredible folks will enable us to come up with the best ideas and also stress test them in our teams. And then the last D, maybe I would highlight, is for doing. We move very rapidly out of concept phase into prototyping and making. It's a very central part of our process inside DFord. So one reason that DFord exists is, as Jim originally imagined, we're going through this huge period of change, transformation and disruption in the automotive industry. So there's many new entrants, particularly in the electrification space, because barriers of entry are much lower. There's a growth of connectivity, 5G, electrification, autonomy, and all these technologies within the automotive space. The rise of big data, and that's just a few things to name. A few of these forces, many of these forces, are creating new and ever increasing expectations for our customers around the world. And a lot of these new technologies are allowing us to meet those new and rising expectations in very different ways than we could have done in the past. This is a picture of our autonomous vehicle that we're pilot testing in the US right now and in other markets in partnership with Argo AI. So really, if I think about this change, what is happening inside our company is that we're transforming from an industrial company that's delivering quite a hardware-focused offering to the customer. So one that's all about the metal and the wheels hitting the road, which is really focused on a one-time transaction at the point of sale, to one actually that's thinking about and imagining the broader ecosystem of solutions, from hardware to software and services, and to moving from that point of sale moment where we sell the vehicle to the customer, to imagining how we can create a lifelong relationship with the customer that is always on and that is powered by data and real-time insights. There's a rapid pace of investment and development in electric vehicles and ultimately in autonomy. And Ford is investing billions of dollars all around the world. And this move, which is a huge seismic shift in our industry, requires much more thought about this broader ecosystem. So simple things like the charging infrastructure and the charging experience, but also think outside of the industry, think about the pace of digital development in our world. And so this collision of trillions of connected devices meeting millions of connected vehicles and all the opportunities that that brings, and to not be overwhelmed by the technology, and that we're keeping our focus very much grounded and centered on the humans that we're trying to serve. So who are we in DFord and what do we do? How do we go about doing it? So I've talked a little bit about why DFord was born. So we're a startup innovation lab inside Ford Motor Company. We bring together, and we are a multidisciplinary group of designers, engineers, and business folks in all these different locations globally. But we're united with that common purpose to accelerate the transformation of Ford Motor Company and to develop breakthrough new ideas, radical products, services, experiences, new ventures even. And what's really important for us is that this team is made up of a combination of Ford folk who've been inside the company for many, many years, and new skill sets and amazing team members that we're bringing in from outside in areas where we need to build up expertise to manage and anticipate some of those forces that I just talked about. Our process is very straightforward. We can split it into 3 parts. So what we do with customers to get inspiration on the research side, generating ideas, building them, and then going through the process of testing those ideas and learning as we go through that process and improving those ideas. Now, this visual makes it sound super simple. For those of you inside the process, you know, who've had experience of the process, you know, it's a lot more complicated than that. So actually, this is a giant kind of messy squiggle that we go through, and it feels very painful when you're inside it. It feels really easy when we zoom out to talk about it. And we go through these cycles as often as we need to get to an outcome and a solution that customers will really love. So our process starts, every project starts with our customer. And so we celebrate our customers, we do design research for inspiration all around the world. And I've been in a wet market in the middle of Thailand at midnight, observing Ranger compact truck customers delivering vegetables and other produce to market, and watching how they unload and reload their vehicles and you can see some of the visuals here, meeting some of our commercial customers who look after and enjoy our transit commercial van here in the UK and other parts of the world. But we don't just think about usage and observational research. We also think about their emotional needs, what their hopes and fears are for the future. And in addition to understanding our customers' needs and hopes and fears, we also think about the future, because very often we are thinking about creating solutions not for today or tomorrow, but for 3 to 5 years, potentially even 7 years down the line. So that combination of that deep understanding of the customer and a real appreciation of the forces that are going to be changing around them gives us the perfect combination of ingredients to create new ideas to really transform and drive innovation for the future. And the other thing to note is that we talk to customers at all stages of the process, not just at the beginning for inspiration. We have a great startup energy and culture. It's wonderful, but inside a 118-year global brand, which is cool. We generate literally thousands of concepts every year. We go very divergent, very broad in our process at the start of the process, but we rapidly move into making. Making or prototyping is an incredibly central part of our process inside DFord. We make to think, we make to learn, we make to communicate our ideas internally to stakeholders and other SMEs inside Ford, but also we make to share with our customers for their builds and their provocations. We don't get too precious. We're quite used to people calling our babies ugly, and so we make lots of them so we can move through the process very quickly. We work on a number of different time horizons. In product creation, we're thinking about creating entirely new products that are perhaps 10 years out. So that would include working with the autonomous vehicle team, for example, or the electrification team, thinking about driverless vehicle delivery services as another example. But we also work in the near, so that's kind of 3 to 5 year time horizon here. And that's looking at the next generation of products and services that we're bringing to the market. And here we help create those concepts, define and prioritize new features and experiences and services. And so that's a different stage of the process. And we move through it very quickly. So summing up, we do a lot of work with customers. We bring all of that together and synthesize it, working with our cross-functional teams internally. We prototype super quickly to learn really fast, and we test and iterate as we go through the process together with our partners inside Ford and our partners, our customers outside the company. And we spend a lot of time at the early part of the process, of course, thinking about desirability. You don't get to pass go unless you have an idea that's valuable for our customers. But then it's also important that they are things that we can make real and make viable for the business. So, and increasingly for the planet. And so all of these considerations we go through as we're racing through the different stages of the process. And because we are working so much in the upfront innovation space, we're often presenting the company with quite radical ideas, which are quite different to our business model that we have today, and quite different in terms of concept to what we have today, to what we're used to in the company. And so part of this process really helps us to reduce risk, to reduce the perceived risk for folks inside the company, but also as we're moving and transforming the business and creating some of these new concepts, that we're helping de-risk some of the company's biggest investments. So here you can see our F-Series business in the US is worth a considerable amount of money. And so rapidly moving through this very iterative process, being very focused on the customer, really helps us unleash the power of human-centered design to significantly de-risk some of these astonishingly large investments. And it, of course, helps us to create more products that customers love and reduce the number that they don't love. So I've talked about the birth of DFord and where we came from. And then I've talked a little bit about the approach that we take. And so I'd just love to share some reflections on driving innovation in a 118-year-old company now. And there are some good things and there are some not so good things. So one of the amazing things is that I get to work on a brand that is hugely recognized and loved and trusted in hundreds of countries around the world. I get to talk to customers all over the world, and actually I get to touch and impact their lives and the lives of millions of those customers if we create new ideas that can be delivered with the scale that Ford Motor Company has. the Ranger pickup truck, for example, which my team works on globally out of Melbourne. We sell in nearly 200 countries around the world. So that's pretty awesome. What's also awesome is our new CEO, Jim Farley, who has incredible passion and vision and a great deal of impatience to affect the change that I just talked about. And he really understands that we need to disrupt ourselves before others come along to disrupt us. And modernizing the business, bringing in new talent, bringing in new tools and new processes and ways of working, and having that drive and ambition and purpose to do that is really going to be, and it is already, a driving force inside the company. So we have an amazing, diverse team. They have huge passion and ambition. And for me, DFord is nothing without this incredible team that we're growing here. It is our superpower, actually. So as I mentioned earlier, we brought together a team of folks from inside and outside Ford. We're building new skill sets and capabilities in the areas that we need to grow, in digital, in data, but also leaning on some of the incredible talent and the passion that we have inside Ford. And so it's incredibly hard, you can imagine, to break a business model that's been successful for 118 years. And so I believe it's really important to have a number of team members who know that system really well, who can hack it very well. And it's really hard to break a business model if you don't understand it deeply. And so our secret sauce, I think, in DFord is bringing that combination of incredible talent from inside the company and this new wonderful group of people who we're bringing in from outside. So designers of all disciplines, data scientists, software designers, interaction designers, service designers, business designers who are going to help us reimagine new business models for the future. And that diversity is a building block and a fundamental belief inside DFord. It's essential for our culture and critical for driving innovation. We work globally as a connected network of labs inside DFord. And this gives us access to many different markets, contexts, and cultures around the world. And it's incredible. We can operate literally 24/7 from Palo Alto to Melbourne at the other end of the clock. And many of our projects increasingly are global in their scope. And so that gives us a wonderful opportunity to build communities of design talent across the world and really learn and build on each other's expertise and experience. But what's hard? That all sounds lovely, but these are not rose-tinted glasses. So it's super difficult, right? So we take on some of the biggest challenges that Ford Motor Company can throw at us, that the world can throw at us. We're going through this huge digital transformation inside the business, and we are all, as humans, going through a massive digital transformation in the world around us. And driving change is really hard if you've had a successful business model for 118 years. So having that incredible talent and that combination of folks from inside and outside helps us really drive the provocation that we need to, and should help us take the risks that we need to drive the change that we're looking for. And the other thing is that digital and data revolution gives us a huge opportunity to develop an even better real-time understanding of our customers and to create even more personalized solutions for them that can rapidly change over time. So enough about us and our process. How are we making all of this real? And so I talked about prototyping. We do that very rapidly in our process, and we go through multiple stages. And the other thing that we do a lot is pilots. So we have a lot of partners that we work with. And here's an example of a partnership that we have here in London, where Ford is teamed up with Hermes to make online shopping smarter, faster, and more sustainable. So this is a last mile delivery pilot that we've been running, where we've teamed up with consumer delivery specialist Hermes to trial a more sustainable courier service, which is aimed at reducing the footprint of parcel deliveries in cities and also making them more timely. And so this partnership, this pilot, uses a system called ModeLink, which is a multimodal routing and logistics software system that coordinates traditional delivery vans, so you can see the lovely transit there in the background, with pedestrian couriers, and helps to identify locations for drivers to park within a safe walking distance of multiple delivery addresses. And so the overall system kind of orchestrates this end-to-end journey for every single parcel, which ensures that deliveries, whether it's for the first mile from the depot to in the vehicle by road, or the last mile from the van to the doorstep on foot, are as efficient and, of course, super importantly, as sustainable as they can be. So that's just an example of how we're making things tangible. And then, of course, there's amazing things that we're actually bringing to market. So we do a lot of work here in London, looking and talking to commercial customers, so business customers. And one of their biggest pain points is downtime. And it's their single worst thing that can happen to a commercial customer is that their vehicle is off the road. So it impacts their business. It can let their end customers down. They could potentially lose business, and it could also damage their reputation. So downtime is very bad. And we're on a mission at Ford and in DFord to get to 100% uptime for our commercial customers in the future. And from the learnings from a very early pilot on a project that we call Project Oracle, we just launched earlier this year a new connected uptime system called Ford Live. And this system uses sensors in our connected commercial vehicles, and it connects those with dealers and our customers directly to minimize downtime in our vehicles for avoidable breakdowns. So it results in fewer trips to the dealer, faster repairs for the customer, as dealers can already anticipate issues and order parts in advance. And all of this improves productivity and reduces downtime by up to 60% for our commercial customers. And that's huge. We've had a fantastic response to this service that we have just launched. We're coupling that service, though, with dedicated Ford Live centers. You can see a picture of one here in our Dunton Product Development Center just outside London. It's a key element of our uptime system, and it provides a huge amount of live data into a team. They can monitor how things are going and in real time provide support both to dealers and to our commercial customers. So it's a wonderful step forward in creating this always-on ecosystem that I talked about. Just one reflection before I move to wrapping up is that the D14 team is a small team inside Ford, and it's really essential as we go through our innovation process that we partner with the rest of the organization, and increasingly we're partnering with folks outside the company. And so this chart just shows you upfront in the process, we spend a lot of time doing the heavy lifting on exploring, deeply understanding customers, looking out of the business, getting inspiration, providing that provocation, creating ideas, and then rapidly testing them in an iterative fashion with our customers and our internal stakeholders. As we get to the middle of the process, our connector teams, so these are folks inside the lab who are outwardly facing into the rest of the business, they identify who in the delivery organizations should be the right folks to work with us upfront to learn these insights about the customer, help us with ideation and provide that internal subject matter expertise, but also then to ready them and their organizations for the moment when we start transitioning concepts out of the lab and into the broader organization and the different skill teams. And so as we build confidence in our concepts and our ideas, we step back more and more as a DFord team and allow the skill teams to take those ideas and bring them to market. And so it's a really exciting moment when that starts to happen. Okay, so looking forward to the future. What's going to happen next? And then I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions that I can help answer. So a couple of really exciting things that we're doing at the moment inside DFord. We're building a couple of new homes for the team. And so what's amazing when you have a team of designers is that you get to design a new playground of innovation. So we've got 2 new spaces that we're designing and building in the Olympic Park in London, in Dunton, which is our commercial vehicle, a global commercial vehicle center just outside London, and also with my teams in Melbourne and also in Brazil. And so these spaces allow for collaboration globally with the other D14 teams, but they're highly collaborative, very flexible spaces that basically allow us to do all the things we love: prototyping, making, collaborating in intense project teams, but also increasingly, we're trying to figure out how this can work in a hybrid world, which we're all living in right now and will be living in for the foreseeable future. So really excited to move into one of those spaces in the next few weeks, the second one in the early part of next year. So just to give you a little tease of what that looks like. And then, of course, the entire company is also transforming. So not only our physical spaces, but our manufacturing facilities. This is a render of the Rouge plant, which is transforming to 100% electrification in the US. This is also happening here in Europe, in Cologne, in Germany, and multiple other places in the world today. This is a huge change, a seismic shift in the auto industry and in the mobility industry. And we are completely determined inside DFord and Ford to not only be part of that transformation, but to drive it, to help make the world a better place for our customers and also to make it a better place for the planet. So I'd love to pause there and just see if we have any questions online that I can help to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Usha. That was a great insight into DFord and Ford more broadly. So we really appreciate all that you shared with us today. We do have some questions. So I will start with Faisal Khan, who's asked, what advice can you give to keep up with the pace of digital and technological innovation?
Yes, gosh, that's $1 million question, I think. So I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I can certainly share what we do inside DFord. And so we have a lot of inspiration sessions. So we regularly invite people that we find interesting, companies that are interesting. They could be startups or internal startups like DFord and other large organizations, people who've launched products recently that are being very successful, who can come in and just provoke us and get us out of our comfort zone. We're hiring a huge number of design talent globally right now, and again, bringing those perspectives in. But actually, the other thing I would say and share this reflection with all of you is a lot of our industrial designers and our business designers have a great perspective on digital too. And so it's that interaction between all these different flavors of people that come together. And we were talking yesterday about how can we create psychological safety in the team where everyone feels comfortable, whether they've been here for 10 minutes or 25 years inside Ford Motor Company, whether they have just joined DFord, whether they are a digital person or a physical person, if such a thing exists anymore in our world. And everyone can provide a perspective. And if we create that safe space for everyone to add, then we're going to create and keep up. I hope that's going to give us the best chance of keeping up. So hopefully that's a little bit of a perspective of how we think about it.
That cross-disciplinary dialogue is certainly exciting in the sense of the potential of what could come out. That's great. We have 2 questions from Fajad Kasim. What are some of the challenges you faced when setting up human-centered design thinking within the business, and how did you overcome them?
Yes, so many. Can you see my bruises? Probably not on the screen. So one challenge, we've had pretty much the same business model inside Ford, manufacturing and selling cars and trucks and vans around the world for 118 years. And so a lot of our leaders have grown up in the business, being successful, executing that business model. And so it's incredibly difficult to, basically turn up as a team and you're calling everybody's child ugly, right? So we're coming up with new ideas for how we break that business model. We think it's really important that we do that. And it's essential, we believe, for our future success and survival. And so calling everyone's child ugly on a regular basis is hard. How we overcome that in a number of ways, we always invite members of the broader organization to be embedded in our project teams. So depending on the problem that we're trying to solve, we'll invite, electrical engineers or marketing people or people who are working with dealers into the project team. So not only are we benefiting from their expertise, but they're already inside the process with us. They're seeing and hearing the customer's pain points, and they're going with us on the journey. So that makes it a little bit easier then as those ideas migrate back into the business, the antibodies, the white blood cells don't come out and eat them up quite so rapidly. We prioritize projects based on our stakeholders. So we're working on the right projects that the business really cares about and that's giving everyone a massive headache. And so we're not, a little kind of fluffy bubble team sitting off in a corner, kind of imagining things in isolation. We're very much connected to what the company cares about, the vision of the company, and the biggest problems that actually the whole team inside Ford is trying to solve. So that also helps us. And we create a lot of prototypes. And what we found is making things tangible as a way of communicating our ideas and getting out of, so rather ironically, I've been presenting in PowerPoint today, but getting out of PowerPoint as quickly as we can to make things real and inviting our stakeholders and other team members in so that, they can sit in the vehicle, they can play around with the prototype, they can give us their feedback, they can build on those prototypes, but also the clarity of understanding of the concepts is much greater when we can make them tangible. And so that also helps. And maybe just one last tip, donuts and coffee also helps. So when we have our big prototype shares, we generally have lots of lovely donuts as a way of inviting and encouraging some of perhaps the shyer members of the broader organization to come in and check out what we're up to.
We use different coatings to encourage different like that. So, and that kind of leads on to another question, which I'll come back to another question for Joe, but how do you know when it's time to hand off a prototype you've developed to another team? And do you keep track of progress with key human-centered aspects through to launch?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say it varies depending on the concept. And so some of our ideas actually become and have become new business ventures. And so those tend to be much more complex, and we stay with those teams much longer in the process, because what happens is that there isn't a natural organization already ready to take the idea and run with it. In one instance, which I can't share in too much detail, otherwise I'd have to find you all and kill you, and I'm sure you're all very lovely. We haven't launched it yet. We're setting up an entirely new business, a joint venture, to bring that idea to market. And so with those teams, we tend to stay with them a lot longer, and we provide support a lot longer in the process. With other teams where we have product concepts or features where we have a lot of established teams already set up in the business, and it's a very clear relationship between the concept that we have and a team that already kind of owns that area inside the company, we can step back much more quickly. once we feel that team is excited and on board and understanding of it. But we always provide a little light support if they want to bring us in a little bit later in the process, just to make sure we're kind of, you know, meeting the needs of the customers as we'd originally imagined. We're there to provide support to that team, but those ideas will also naturally evolve a little bit further as we bring them to realization, and that I think is normal.
Great, thank you. There's some really good questions, so I'm just trying to look to see.
You're doing great, Margaret. Thank you.
It's great. It's great to continue and hear more and more from you. So something that continues from yesterday, we looked quite a lot about the circular economy.
Yes.
And one question from Hassan Khan is, what are Ford doing to innovate areas for the circular economy?
So you can imagine in my team, I mean, the whole team, and myself included, is super obsessed with creating solutions that are sustainable. And so the thing that we are grappling with is, how do we make them valuable to customers? Because what we found is that there are a small number of customers who will buy things and will want things simply because they're making the world a better place and they're very passionate about sustainability and circularity. For the vast majority of customers still, it is something that they're less willing to pay extra for. And so our mantra really is, take commercial customers, for example. Commercial customers are super obsessed with productivity for their businesses. And so if we can create solutions that are sustainable and improve their productivity, then it's a no-brainer for them. And so for us, we're looking for solutions that allow us to do both, knowing that customers will accept it if it gives them productivity. And actually, increasingly, what we're hearing from customers, large fleets, large businesses in particular, is that, you know, they too want to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability goals. And also there's a lot of regulation as well. And so the world is shifting. It's shifting slowly. I think it will get faster and faster. And I think our job is to make things valuable for the customer and also sustainable. So I would put it like that. And that's the trick for us as a design team and creative community, I think.
I hope that answers Peter's question as well, and Peter Webster. I'm going to go back up to Rajiv Mayer. He sending thanks to you for your presentation, and he says, you mentioned the critical role of the skill team in moving from a viable pilot to a successful scaling initiative. So what do you do to ensure the teams involved in the scaling stage are fully brought in and equipped to bring to life the ideas?
Yeah, that's another great questions, guys. That's another terrific question. I think on this one, I'm not sure we've completely cracked it yet, to be honest. A lot of our ideas are just coming through that stage of the process now, the scaling stage. And we've had some challenges with some where it's been something that's completely new to the business. It's been really tough. And we're providing, I think, a lot more support by sharing all of the insight work, all of the thinking that got us to the concepts in the first place, but also a number of other processes that we offer on the affecting change through new ways of working side of what we do inside DFord, to help those teams make sure that the composition of those teams has the right makeup as we're moving from this, hardware, focused organization to a much more digital focused organization. We're kind of moving from project management to product management. And so the skill team composition for those little product teams, who is in those teams, and then how those teams run as we're scaling is a super area of focus for us. But I can't say we've cracked it 100% yet. We're still in the rapidly prototyping and trying lots of things stage of that process. The cool thing about DFord is pretty much everything is a prototype, right? So our spaces are prototypes, our processes are prototypes. We turn all the tools on ourselves on a regular basis as well.
Great, thank you. So there's a question from Diana. Oh, I lost it. Diana Robinson. She asks, what will the impact be for the world having trillions of mobiles, computers, vehicles connected all at once?
That's another great question. So honestly, every time I think about this, it really does hurt my head. And it feels today incredibly complex to imagine that, because we're actively processing every one of those connections and trying to imagine how that would work. I think in reality, what will happen with the rise of kind of compute power is many of the things that we don't really need to think about will become completely invisible to us. And we'll have giant computing systems just handling and automating and organizing and getting rid of a lot of those more mundane things that we don't need to care about. The things that will come to the fore are the moments where, because we still believe as a human-centered design team in DFord that we need to give customers control over technology, and they need to determine, well, firstly, from a data and a privacy perspective, what's happening and make those choices. But secondly, whether they want things to be automated or whether they want to have an active role in determining how things happen for themselves. So I guess my simple view of it, in the hope that my head doesn't explode in the next 5 years, is that a lot of those mundane things get automated and compute power and the cost of connectivity is just plummeting. And so these ecosystems are working very seamlessly together in service of humanity. And then there's going to be some amazing ecosystem experiences that are going to feel like magic, I think, compared to what we're experiencing today.
I love the sound of that magic.
Me too.
Yes, prospect of it. So I guess in terms of the ecosystem, there's a question here from Andrew Peterson who says, and this is more specifically within DFord, I think, you mentioned the ability to go 24/7 as you have 3 hubs around the world. But do you actually share or roll projects around the world, or do you typically have separate projects that each studio focuses on?
Yeah, so a bit of both at the moment, but I think increasingly we're going to be doing more global projects. So we have a project right now that my London team and Melbourne team are working on together. And so time zone wise, that can pose a few challenges, but also we have an opportunity as well to take advantage of those time zones. So the teams work up until, the end of the day in London, and then the Melbourne team is just waking up and then they can keep going. And so we like that. Where it works best is where there's a little bit more overlap in the day. So we're doing another project with our team in Detroit. And so we have a half a day overlap. So that's pretty awesome. And so all of the kind of the team collaboration sessions can happen. Of course, all of that is happening digitally right now, but those can happen in the overlap zone. And then the asynchronous work, the team can divide up and do in the other 2 halves of a day, if you like, when they're apart. And that actually has worked pretty well. We do prototyping in both locations, depending on the talent that we have working in the team, sometimes digital, sometimes physical. And obviously in the pandemic, we can do things a little bit more physically now in London, but the Detroit team, unfortunately, is still 100% remote. So they're doing the heavy lifting on the digital prototyping. So it's also kind of a cool experiment for us, trying these different ways of hybrid working globally and asynchronously as well.
Those moments of overlap must be like high productivity.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up the session today, but it was great. Thank you everyone for joining the session and for the great questions to Usha. And Usha, we really appreciate your time and insight into the work you're doing at the Innovation Lab. And yes, thank you again for joining us at the Global Design Forum.